And we also have other initiatives that we have engaged in to support the elderly program. So I think I'll just stop there, and the chair invites any questions or points for clarification.
Thank you, P.S. Jennings. I would throw that out to the members if there are any questions they want to ask now, but I would myself ask, the home health aid program, is that a program under the National Council for Senior Citizens, or is that in conjunction with the Ministry of Health? P.S., could you just close your mic for me?
Good morning, Chair.
This is...
My name is Cassandra Morrison.
And you're the head of the National Council on Senior Citizens. I'm doing that for our friends abroad listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So the Home Help Service Program is specifically within the National Council for Senior Citizens. This is a service that is provided primarily by volunteers who are registered with the National Council for Senior Citizens and assist older people in their homes with household chores. And
you said home help?
Yes.
I am sorry. Help. I heard home health.
Oh.
Okay,
help.
Forgive me. All right. Yes. I understand now. Thank you so much. And then you also said, P.S., that you have a program, an awareness program at the ministry. Is that also through the National Council? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. So we engage at the parish level with family members, the public in general, church communities, and so on, to educate persons on how to treat with older people in their homes.
Okay. What's the name of the program?
Well, it is basically, we do a lot of information seminars at the community level.
Okay.
And this is just one of the target areas.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Senator Gale.
Chair, so the reach across parishes is specifically through community engagement, because you don't have, your council doesn't have offices in parishes, or you operate through the ministry's operations in the parishes.
Right. So within the Ministry of Labor and Social Security parish offices reside one social worker employed to the National Council for Senior Citizens.
Okay.
And this one social worker engages with the various stakeholders at the community level and parish-wide to organize these types of activities.
Maybe it kind of opened another question that I wanted to ask later on. But in terms of your staffing complement, is that one sufficient enough to carry out effectively your mandate?
No, sir, it is inadequate, grossly.
Has there been well, I will take the term grossly as an advisory, but has there been an assessment in the determining needs as to what would be required to effectively carry out in terms of a complement?
So the Ministry of Labor and Social Security has committed funding within the upcoming financial year to undertake a strategic review of the National Council for Senior Citizens to provide such information.
Okay, all
yes.
right. I'll take that for now.
Thank you, Senator Gale. Senator Dr. Morris, could you open your mic, please? Are we able to hear Senator Morris?
Hello?
Yes, thank you, Senator Morris. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. I am, as you're aware, I'm away, and so, I'm doing several things at the same time. And I just want to also welcome the team from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and say, P.S., you could have prompted me that you were going to be in Parliament based on our discussion. But good to have you and the team from the ministry here. It's a very important subject matter, and commendations to the uh, National Council for National Council for Senior Citizens for the tremendous job that they have been doing. Couple of quick things. One, you indicated that figure PS for 63,000 individuals who directly benefit from PAR, which basically is about 1/5 of the senior citizens population. And it would be good if we could get the data as it relates to those senior citizens who are on social pension and those who are on the national insurance scheme, so that it can give us a more global picture of the number of senior citizens who are benefiting from some form of social protection, right? And you also spoke about a number of initiatives and activities that, you know, the senior citizens are involved with through the council. And I noticed you never mentioned uh, the quiz competition, and there's one that I introduced that I was really appreciative of, and that is the sports day that used to take place. Are those activities still taking place with the senior citizens? And I leave those for now.
Go ahead, PS.
Yes, Senator, those programs are still in existence and they have been growing stronger and stronger each day. The quiz competition, spelling bee competition, as well as sports day are other activities. I didn't care to mention all the activities that the National Council for Senior Citizens is engaged in. But also to note that the number of persons who benefit from the social pension program is about 14,000. These are? Yes, and 140,000 for NIS.
140,000 for NIS and 14,000 for the social pension. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So you said 140 for the NIS?
Yes.
Okay. So cumulatively, we're talking about close to 230,000 senior citizens are getting some form of social protection.
Yes, sir. And with the figure we have, which is about 2018, yes, is about 300,000 persons, elderly persons.
Because that figure wouldn't include the GOJ pensioners.
No. The figures we gave for social pension and NIS would not include the one through the Accountant General's department.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it would, I don't know if you would have that data, but Madam Chair, what I'm trying to do is to see if we could get a global picture as to the extent of protection that is there in terms of social protection for our senior citizens now.
I understand, Senator Morris, and I think much of this information is good for learning and really does help us to contextualize and for focus on the issues that we need to be looking at. But I do also want to remind my colleagues that we are not we are not considering program development and activity enhancement. We are here looking at the fundamentals that need to be contained in a law. And so if we're looking at legislation, then, you know, whether it's 20 senior citizens or 200,000 senior citizens, the question is, what do we need an elder care law to contain? And I suppose the numbers can guide us in terms of deciding what are the real imperatives that we need to be discussing. So I am enjoying the learning in terms of the structure of how we protect our senior citizens, the issues that they may face, and what the response of the state has been from a program and policy perspective. But I would ask the team, as you proceed through your presentation this morning, and I see the position paper very properly directs us in that way, to help to guide us so that as we hear from you, we can have in our minds those matters that we can discuss further in terms of an elder care law. And I'm using that loosely because we haven't made a decision about what we would propose or recommend such a legislation to be called. Right. So, P.S.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Morris.
That discussion is very germane to what is happening here, you know, in terms of our remit, because social protection is going to form a fundamental part of any legislation, and the social protection will have to spell out all those programs that are there for senior citizens.
I agree with you, Senator Morris, but I don't know that you put programs like that in a law. That's the point I'm making. So it's useful and it is informative, but I'll leave it to the team to deliver further on what they have to tell us. And then I'm sure we'll have robust discussions about what should be contained in our recommendations. Madam P.S.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And just to note that the figure I gave in terms of pensioners, from that number we have 48,000 who are government pensioners. All right, so in terms of the gaps that we have seen and challenges in elderly care, we note that there is the concern about financial protection of elderly persons. And as we gave that figure, we note that not many persons are contributing to the National Insurance Scheme. So the ministry is on a campaign to ensure that we have more persons registered at a younger age, but also to ensure that we have persons contributing. And what we have noticed is that the persons in the informal sector, for example, are persons who usually require additional support, extra social protection because of their non-contribution to this scheme. We also have, we would have embarked on programs to treat with persons in agriculture, persons in fisheries, and domestic workers as part of the promotion to persons in the formal sector and contributing to the scheme. All right, so in terms of other areas, we would have identified that there is the whole issue of social isolation for some persons who are elderly, and that would mean that there are persons who would be predisposed to being abused or to be preyed upon. So in terms of other areas that we could consider if we're going in the direction of legislation to protect and care for older persons, we would be looking at whether there needs to be mandatory family support and what legal would be necessary for family members to the maintenance and care of senior citizens. There is the Maintenance Act, as I would have mentioned before, under the remit of the Ministry of Justice, and it would be based on, I think, Section 12 of that Act, the local authority and government agencies would be able to appropriate the Act to support elderly persons who may be abused. And at this time, the Assistant Attorney General, Ms. Kerry Osborne, would elucidate further on the provisions of that Maintenance Act as it relates to elderly persons.
Thank you, Mrs. Osborne. Just turn on your mic. Thank you.
Good morning again. So we note that even though the maintenance doesn't allow the Ministry of Labor to actually intervene and bring a claim on behalf of an elderly person, it does afford an elderly person to bring a claim themselves directly before the court to get an order for maintenance against, well, from their child, and it goes up to even their grandchildren. So there are means within the legislation for the elderly person or an elderly person to gain some form of maintenance from their child or grandchildren, whosoever it is proven that they are their dependent. But the ministry, even though we're not able to directly intervene on their behalf, we are in a position to at least give them that information and direct them to the proper channels where they can so apply to the court or get further assistance.
And you do that through the National Council, or they come directly to the ministry? What's the channel that they use to get that advice and direction from you?
Well, I know that, well, firstly, many times they do go directly to the National Council where they are so advised. Okay. So.
And are you aware, Ms. Osborne, do you have any idea of the number of maintenance cases that are filed in relation to elderly folk in Jamaica? No, the ministry will not be seized of such information currently. That's information that I think we would be interested in hearing. I don't know, perhaps Court Administration Division, Mrs. Beckford could assist us with that information. I quite frankly have never heard of a maintenance case filed by an elderly person in Jamaica, but that just may be me. Go ahead.
In doing our research, we were not able to arrive at a figure. You know, it was, many persons don't know that the Maintenance Act actually provides this kind of protection for senior citizens, and senior citizens really wouldn't know that they have this right. So that's where the ministry would come in to try and guide them. But senior citizens would need more help, because many times, even if they are with somebody who is looking after them, they wouldn't want to go and, you know, complain that they're not properly being maintained, or even just this morning we're discussing, there are a lot of issues surrounding senior citizens applying for maintenance, especially where they didn't even look after the children that they're no requiring this assistance from. So it has some nuances, and senior citizens really many times are not aware or would not want to apply under the Maintenance Act. So that is an area that we really need to look at. But as I did indicate, our ministry would not have the legislative powers to act under the Act. So we have to do it indirectly as providing the information and guidance to channel them through the appropriate persons to assist.
I mean, I can see such concerns, and I see Senator Fraser-Binns, whose hand is up. 1 minute, Senator, and I'm sure you'll expand on this. The Section 12 of the Maintenance Act provides for the elderly person to seek that maintenance order. But if that, go ahead.
We did
Mrs.
indicate local authorities and government agencies can assist on their behalf as well,
Can assist,
can make the application as well.
and that's in section 12?
Section 12.2, where it says that where a local authority or other government agency is providing assistance in respect of the maintenance of a dependent, or where an application for such assistance has been made by or on behalf of the dependent, the local authority or other government agency may apply directly to the court for the maintenance order.
Senator Gale.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Senator Gale.
Oh.
Can I pause you because Senator Fraser-Binns had her hand up? I apologize. Senator Fraser-Binns?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I have two questions for Ms. Lopez, I believe her name is. The first is if you could share with us an idea of the number of persons who have come to you and to whom you have directed to apply for assistance under Section 12. And secondly, you mentioned on the 12B or 12.2 that the ministry and its agencies can assist. And I want to find out whether you have done any assistance to these persons, and if so, how many have you assisted and over what period?
Go ahead, Ms. Morrison.
All right, Chair, thank you. The council does not have that information, but we are, I think we can safely say that number is very minimal when it does happen, because senior citizens do not usually, even when we have a discussion with them, they do not usually want to pursue a maintenance order.
I see. Senator Fraser-Binns?
Yeah, yes, thanks, Chair, because I do have a follow-up, just trying to find out if she could share some of the reasons for the reluctance in pursuing the maintenance order.
Thank you. Ms. Morrison?
Yes, some of the reasons shared with us, Chair, I think they're mostly cultural. I think most senior citizens are embarrassed by the fact that they have to go to the court to basically beg for their children to care for them. And there are other issues that have to do with conflicts within the family, and the issue that was raised before where the parents might not have been very active in the lives of their children, and so they do not believe that they deserve to be supported.
Thank you. Senator Gale?
You know, I can understand the disadvantage in this case because they are vulnerable at the point. And being vulnerable, you feel exposed that you would have to now take it upon yourself to make that application. So maybe we should consider an expansion of the law that gives the authority to take it on their behalf, so it don't expose them to that level of vulnerability. But I was looking through the legislation in terms of, you made mention of the authority. What would be the defined authority in this case?
Well, I know that the local authority,
The local authority.
yes,
Sorry.
as defined by the, I believe it was the Local Government Act, it would be like the municipal corporations, the city municipal, senior municipalities or town municipalities constituted in accordance with Section 8. So, again, it would be the municipal.
Section 8. Did you say 8?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Of the Maintenance Act.
Of the maintenance.
Local Government Act.
Oh, so it is being dependent now on
Yes.
a different kind of legislation
Indeed.
that would not have been referenced in this one.
No. Just that
Again,
the Maintenance Act did not define who
it
the
did
local
not.
authorities or
Right,
the
it didn't
government
define it.
agency. So then I had to go and look now, and then from there you found the local government explain what the local authority
And there
is.
lies another identifiable deficiency. Or gap.
Indeed, indeed.
Our gap. Yes. You know, I made the comment, and I recall some time ago, I think it was when the tobacco regulations might have been promulgated, that obviously Parliament is guided by how the policy develops, and how the policy develops then, and what is developed as policy then guides our drafters through drafting instructions. But I do have to make the comment that, and I said it at the beginning of this committee's session, that all of us here deliberating over what the elder law should look like are not ourselves elderly people. And as I look at the team from the Ministry of Labor, I don't see any elderly folks over there either. And so I want to call my colleagues, and I feel that the call will be welcomed by them all, for us to be very deliberate about proposals for a law that have practical effect and aren't just provisions put down on paper that are really onerous, burdensome, and because the barriers to accessing the legal provisions are so high, they really come to naught. You know, just recently, the House of Representatives passed amendments to the Procurement Act, the Public Procurement Act, which took out a lot of the bureaucratic provisions. I have to say, sometimes when I see the policy matters coming from the technical teams in the ministry, I wonder sometimes how many of the teams actually go out on the ground, get outside of the building, and go and really see how Jamaican people live and what they actually go through. Because I cannot imagine, and I would be happy to be wrong, but I cannot imagine that any municipal corporation anywhere has filed any maintenance case for any elderly person in Jamaica. And yet we have this provision that has been enacted in law. And we make this up and we pass it here in the Parliament. So I know I have kindred spirits on my committee on both sides of the aisle when I say these committee members and this committee want to be seized of the things that are really impacting our elder community. And we're going to be interrogating those who come before us to ensure that the things that you're telling us are really things that work for the elder community, because this maintenance provision, I can't imagine it works very well for them at all. So what you're really advising us of, Ms. Osborne, is a need for us to look very carefully then at the recommendations we're going to make in order to plug the gap to ensure that our senior citizens are able to be maintained and access the court if they need to be. And how that happens, we're going to ask you to think about, if you don't have it to tell us today, at some later date, what does that look like for you at the National Council for Senior Citizens, given the experience that you're having in engaging with our seniors? Senator Gale.
Well, I think, Chair, one of the things that could assist us, and I believe Senator Morris may have slightly touched on it, it's whether or not there is a data collection system that you have in place to track the conditions and the well-beings of senior citizens. And if not, then what kind of system and support would be required to do that? Because if we're going to be one enacting a piece of legislation to ensure the care and protection of senior citizens, then we have to put systems in place to track those conditions that we are seeking to examine and to protect. Yeah? And I am asking first if you have one in place, and if not, to consider what kind of system might be effective. I take note also, P.S. Jennings, you would have mentioned other legislations in comparison. And maybe in the development of your policy, or if there are any other policies that have in place that kind of mechanism, it certainly, in my mind, would be suitable for this kind of approach that we're taking.
Thank you, Senator Gill.
Certainly, Member. In terms of data, I think we have some ways to go in terms of having persons being part of the, well, in the policy, we have the social registry for older persons. So that is an activity that we would be looking at in terms of implementing. So we should note that there are some recommendations in the policy that we are looking to implement. And as was indicated earlier, we have made some provisions in this financial year to see how we can roll out some of these activities to strengthen the support that we give to our seniors, and of course to ensure that they are protected. So one area is the registry. And of course, there are other areas. Based on what you mentioned, I note that, and in conversation with some seniors, the whole matter of paying a lawyer, going to court and incurring all those costs is also an issue for them. You'd see that some persons are pensioners, and if they're not getting the support from maybe a child or somebody else to support them in you know, the funds that they will incur for some of these activities, and it becomes a challenge. So I know that that's one other area that we need to consider. But also to note that even in this establishment of the committee, we will be interacting and engaging the seniors in getting their perspectives, because, Chair, we can't do this without them. Nothing without the seniors we can do in bringing the discussion forward. They have to be a part of it.
Thank you for that acknowledgement. And before Senator Dr. Morris comments, and I really thank you for that acknowledgement, because I know I have some, is it nonagenarians? And I'm going to call her out, Mrs. Veronica Carnegie, who follows this committee and the work of this committee. And she has some colleagues who are listening, all of them in their 90s. And I think that you cannot engage this kind of reform and without consulting with Dr. Morris. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, you know, one of the things about the legislative process is that it is always evolving, and we always keep our legislative work under review to currency. And I think that is one of the things that is deficient in our jurisprudence, because because, some of these legislation are antiquated. And so it is good that we are looking at this process now. And there are a couple of things that emerging from the discussion, and based on my look at other pieces of legislation and legislation that are similar to the whole construct of the senior citizens, we're going to have to look at establishing as a statutory body the Council for Senior Citizens, because currently they now function as a department in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. And in order to give them standing, you're gonna have to establish them as a statutory body. And then we will have to look at, as Covered said, establishing a national registry of senior citizens to make sure that we are able to track our senior citizens and to know the various services that they have access to, the benefits that they are accessing, etc. And included in that, we will have to give powers to the Senior Citizens Council to engage in consistent public education and public awareness of issues relating to maintenance that we just discussed, because obviously there is a deficiency there, and some people don't even know of their obligations, not just to mama and papa, but also to grandma. Because the statute would have covered those individuals as well. So we are going to have to look at the framework, that governance framework for our senior citizens, and it has to be placed in the statute. I took note, Mrs. Jennings, when you mentioned that, I think it is in Cayman, that they have recently established a sort of quasi-judicial body that looks at the rights of senior citizens, something akin to the Disability Rights Tribunal that, or the Industrial Dispute Tribunal that we have here in Jamaica. Because if senior citizens are complaining about the cost to going into the court, one option that we could look at is having that sort of quasi-judicial body that could act in their interest. So those are some of the things that we would want to look at in terms of the legislative framework. But I will end my comment here for now.
Thank you, Senator Morris. I note the Maintenance Act is not an old act, Well, it's 20 years old today. That's in the life of legislation, not old. And yes, life can develop and things can overtake us. But I wanted to ask a few questions of the council. When was the council established?
In 1976, Chair. So
the council is almost as old as I am. And can you tell us a little bit about the mandate of the council?
Yes, Chair. I think originally the council came out of the work of volunteers who were caring primarily for vulnerable older people before there was that need or recognition by the government to establish the council. Since then, the work of the council has been to advise the Minister of Labor and Social Security of matters and issues related to older people and the situations that they face and would experience. The council was also mandated to work with other ministries, departments, and agencies to create that environment that would support people aging better and aging well in society, and to work with stakeholders to implement what was thereafter drafted in 1977, the first national policy for senior citizens. The council was also mandated to advocate for senior citizens and their issues, and also to implement intergenerational approaches.
And would you say that you have been able to execute on all those prongs of your mandate, or has the council morphed into more an implementer of programs as opposed to an advisory or advocacy body?
I think we have done both, Madam Chair, over time. We will recall from the history of the council, I can recall matters such as recommendations for the National Health Fund, which came out of advocacy from the National Council for Senior Citizens. Well, I should say the Jamaica Drug for the Elderly Program, JADEP, which then became National Health Fund, or part of the National Health Fund. Right. Also for a committee and a registry to be established within the Ministry of Health and Wellness that would see to monitoring of nursing homes and the situation, the quality of care and situation of older people in nursing homes. And so off the top of my head, those would be some of the larger advocacy matters that the council would have engaged in over time. The social pension, implementation of the social pension is also another that came from the revision of the national policy for senior citizens.
Right. Right. I heard what you said in words, but I feel like you ended where I started. And the reason I'm saying that, well, let me ask the question. Let me ask it as a question. What has been the role of the council in terms of legislative advocacy? What has the council been engaged in, let's say in the last 20 years, in terms of promulgating legislation that affect the elderly? Does the council review legislation that comes to the parliament, or are you part of the stakeholder groups that get to see legislation affecting the elderly?
Chair, the council exists to advise the minister. So my understanding and my experience is that no, we are not part of that process to look at legislation. There might be policies that are being implemented by other ministries, departments, and agencies, and the council is, as you have said, a stakeholder in part of the review of some of these policies.
That's interesting to me, because the question that arises then becomes, well, how does the minister get advised about legislative matters affecting the elderly if the very council that engages with the elderly isn't involved in that conversation? Thank you, P.S.
Chair, I think Mrs. Morrison was also trying to say that they are involved in advocacy work in terms of advocating for matters that relate to the elderly in terms of improving their lives. And the council is currently a department within the Social Security Division of the ministry. And so they'll be party to the review of policies or legislation that impact the elderly. So we would have been consultation from and in addition to that, we have members who are very au fait matters treating with the elderly. We have persons like Professor Eldemar Shearer.
For the purpose of the public, can you say what you mean when you say the board?
Okay, so there's an advisory board of the National Council for Senior Citizens, and we have, how many members? We have 16 members on that board, and these are persons who come with various expertise and experience. Some of them are persons who are elderly themselves, and so they can contribute to different aspects that would impact the lives of the elderly persons, whether it be health, social protection, financial, varying aspects, information, digital literacy, productive aging, and so forth, that would enhance the lives of persons who are in that age group. And I should also mention that the policy that was revised recently has an implementation plan, a broad plan of action that will also guide the trajectory of the council. And so these are some of the areas that the board would utilize in giving the guidance that will be necessary for us to move forward. So there's also the area of technology. There's the area as it relates to advocacy, accessing income-generating activities for persons who are old, preserving their assets, the whole matter of retirement, and such the like.
Thank you. I'm going to yield to Senator Dr. Morris. It's Senator Dr. Morris? Okay. I'm going to yield to Senator Dr. Morris, and I'll pick up after.
Okay. Yes, Madam Chair. Just indicating, when I drafted the motion, it was triggered based on research that I was doing on persons with disabilities, senior citizens, and the whole issue relating to disabling conditions such as dementia. And I recalled that from as far back as when I was Minister of State in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and used to have discussion with the Senior Citizens Council, there was discussion about legislation to protect senior citizens. Now, I say that because I take note that the person representing the senior citizens, I don't remember her name just now, but it was Miss Taylor, the executive director then. And so there was that constant interaction between the Council for Senior Citizens, the chairman then, Professor Eldemar Shearer, and the minister, who happened to be me because I used to go to those board meetings. So there is a mechanism for interaction between the Council for Senior Citizens and also there is a representative of the on the board of the citizens that would be integral to the function. So I don't know what is it that obtained now, but definitely I agree with you, Madam Chair, that there is no way that any legislation just being at the table in terms of the discourse. Right? This committee to all senior citizens of Jamaica who are watching and listening and would want to comment to see what they think should be included in any legislation relating to them. Who have stated, Madam Chair, in our discussion that that avenue is open and not closed or totally to the public.
Mr. Morris, and you're quite right. It is something we will develop in consultation with the Parliament as we go forward, as you and I had discussed. I want to continue in my line of questioning to interrogate the capacity of the National Council in terms of legal support. Is the council, how big is the legal department at the council? Let me say it that way. Yes.
The National Council for Senior Citizens is currently a department within the Ministry of Labor and Social Security and would benefit from the legal departments, the lawyers in the legal department, and we have about five of them. And is the legal department organized in such a way that there is a single council responsible for the department of the National Council? So the work is, however, it is divided up amongst the lawyers. Ms. Osborne?
Yes, so what happens is whenever an issue or concern is raised, then it would be assigned to, it can be assigned to any of the attorneys at the ministry.
5 attorneys?
Yes, so right now we have the elderly care proposed legislation assigned to a particular attorney. So because that legislation is assigned to the attorney, what would happen now, anything that arises from that legislation or proposed legislation, I do apologize, then that attorney would be the person tasked with answering or researching. So anything not to do with elderly care would go to that person, but not issues or anything being sent to us from the National Council.
Okay. So, and I have some familiarity with the structure of the government system. We're talking about a significant and growing population in the country, and we are talking about a law that deals with them as a segment of the society in the same way we have laws that deal with children. You have a huge ministry. You deal with labor and employment matters. You deal with industrial disputes. You deal with social security frameworks and structures. And a subset of that is the elderly. And you can't possibly get an elder care legislation out of your ministry with 5 lawyers. You just can't. I don't see how you can. I think that's an almost impossible task, especially if the National Council is just a department. And I'm asking this question not so much to be expository in my remarks, but to consider, because one of the suggestions that arose in our debate, I know I made it and I've had discussions with Senator Morris and with some of my other colleagues about it, is the question of a law that contains provisions for an advocate. I'm going to call it an elder care advocate, and I think PS referenced something like that in her earlier remarks. Now, there were conversations about the National Council being the body that would sort of morph into that kind of structure. But what I'm hearing is a sort of implementing agency, a monitoring department, and not really a department that has a sort of legislative focus. So we've had this maintenance act sitting down for 20 years now, right? And it's just an act, it's one of the tools, but in just this conversation, you're saying to me, boy, this is what the provision is, and our reaction is, but that can't possibly work, and we've taken 20 years to talk about it. So how, and I'm very eager, I'm going to stop talking because I'm very eager for you to take us through this position paper, because how you seem to have framed your conversation here may very well be the guidance that my members are seeking. But I think the information you've provided has been very helpful, and it helps us to understand better what you do. What is clear is that the National Council is almost first in time in terms of confronting issues that the elderly have. You're who they come to, generally, in terms of the government system. So that experience is what we are going to sort of be leaning to help us to determine what are the provisions that we need to put into a law such as this that are informed by the experience you have. So I'm going to stop talking now because I'm very eager to hear about this submission that you have made. Senator Gill.
You know, you would have raised the matter in relation to the legislation, and I want us to start conceptualizing in our mind who is going to be the authority to take charge of this particular legislation. Let's frame that in our minds from now. You know, just like how you would have had the disabilities legislation residing in the Ministry of Labor. We are to start thinking who is going to be the authority to take this on, and if we are pursuing a legislation, then the arms and legs that are going to be supportive of effecting this legislation, we have to start thinking about that from now.
Thank you for that caution, Senator Gill. Yes?
Chair, the ministry has remit for senior citizens. So I think in terms of if we're going in the direction of the legislation for elderly persons, it would be within the remit of the ministry. We would have to take the lead on that. And as I said, we have started the discussions internally. That committee will deliberate further in terms of some of the issues, and that would also mean the consultation with elderly persons as part of that, so that we can bring to bear their perspectives in treating with what provisions we would be considering in a legislation like this if we're going down that road. I should also mention that the national, as we are still rolling out the policy for the national policy for senior citizens. And so it will see the strengthening of what we have as a department of the National Council for Senior Citizens. We don't know what it will be yet, but that organizational review will recommend what that structure should look like based on the policy considerations that were put forward. And so department will be strengthened to enable it to do more. As I mentioned, they have been involved in varying aspects, the coordination, the implementation, the monitoring, and of course the advocacy. And with the board of the council, we know that we can get additional support because the persons who we know are serving on that board, including a representative from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, to be that liaison between the board and the ministry, will enable us to advance the policy further. I must also mention that one of the other areas that we had looked at was whether there could be consideration for that tribunal for older persons. I mean, Senator mentioned the whole aspect of the Disabilities Rights Tribunal, and this is one other tribunal that could be considered for older persons if we're moving in that direction of legislation. The whole matter of elder abuse is one other area that needs to be considered in our legislation if we're moving in that direction, and how we treat with that. Is it going to be mandatory for older persons to report cases of abuse, and what that channel should be? And also, is there a need for a caregivers registry? Is there a need for identifying what the rights of older persons would be, and would that be in that legislation, or some would have already been considered under the Disabilities Act, where it would have outlined some of the rights of a person with a disability, whether they're old or they're young, whether it be access to transportation, access to education, training, employment, health services, health care, and that sort of thing. So those are some of the matters that would have come up in terms of, accessibility for spaces for persons who are senior citizens, and the whole matter of their care and protection in general.
Thank you, P.S. P.S. I don't know if I'm lacking the clarity, because one of the submissions we have here entitled "A Case for Legislation on the Care and Protection of Older Adults in Jamaica." I thought, and I suspect there's some of what is discussed here was mentioned. Is it your intention to go through this with us, or to highlight the issues in this? Okay. Or is it something else?
I think that may have been something else that may have been submitted by the chairman.
Ah, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So I don't know if that has been discussed already.
Submission of the advisory board of the National Council.
Right.
Ah, okay. All right. So this is a different. Okay. Very well. I think what the committee is hoping is that, in your experience, that you might be able to provide us with some concrete proposals for what kinds of provisions ought to be included in the kind of legislation that we're contemplating. And then I've heard you mention the case of, elder abuse, the need for registry of caregivers, perhaps the tribunal, I'm not sure what we would call it, and enshrining the rights of the elderly population. But I think the committee would be even better served if, in your considered view, you could sort of map out for us, from your perspective, the broad subject matter that you consider such a law ought to contain, with any particular highlights or specificity arising from your collective experience and engagement with our senior citizens. And that might be something that you have in your knowledge base already, based on your experiences to date. It might be something that your members would, your stakeholders would wish to opine on. But I think that kind of concrete document that we could use and we could deliberate on as a committee towards the end of this committee would be very helpful if you could help us with that.
All right, Chair. Based on what we have researched so far and in consultation with the council, there are some areas that we have identified, but I also want to indicate that the committee that we said would be looking at it would delve further and probably would be able to give us a report that would contain the possible provisions that we could look at. So this is just preliminary.
The committee
within the ministry
currently engaged in that work?
Well, the committee has been, the NCSC has been engaged in some work informally, but the committee is supposed to be giving that oversight and guidance to advance that.
Okay. And is there a timeline on when the committee will complete its work?
Well, I think we're looking at 6 months.
6 months. Okay. Very well. Thank you. Senator Fraser-Binns?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman, for that. And Chairman, though we're distance apart, I think we're very close in terms of our thinking, because I too wanted to hear a little bit more from the ministry and the council in terms of some proposals as to what could be contained into this piece of legislation, and you have already indicated that. So I'm giving some support to you in that regard. So that's the first thing. Chairman, I also want to find out from, through the PS, whether she or any of her support staff could share with us on the issue of elder abuse, because I know they mentioned it as an area to be looked at in the legislation. But I am particularly keen to find out if there are any, well, there clearly have been reports, but how many reports have been, have come to their attention, and, how have they been treated with, and if they could also share, perhaps they do not have all that data today, but certainly I am interested in finding out from where these abuse come. Are they from family members or persons who are close to them? I want to know who are the perpetrators of the elder abuse. So if they could share that bit of information, as well as the number of reports that they have received over a period of time. And thirdly, Chairman, the PS mentioned earlier about the tribunal that exists in the Cayman Islands. And I am very keen to find out a little bit more about the tribunal and how it operates. And if perhaps in her response, she could just briefly give us an overview of how that tribunal operates, so that we could consider certainly lend our minds to that when we're looking at the drafting of that legislation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fraser-Binns. Yes?
Okay, so let me just go through some of the areas that we would have identified that could be for consideration for the legislation, and then I'll delve further into the response to Senator Binns. Okay, so we're thinking that the legislation certainly will have some standard definitions of, what the senior citizen is or the older person would be, and also in terms of who is defined as a family member. And we sought to model that with what was in the Older Persons Act for South Africa. We also thought that we would consider mandatory family support, if that's an issue to be reviewed and up for consideration, and establishing if there are any legal obligations for family members to contribute to the maintenance and care of senior citizens. So of course that may have some impact on what is already in the, sure.
Turn it again.
Because I may forget that type
Go
of
ahead,
person
Senator.
sometimes. But this mandatory, this contribute, is it a specialized fund that is being thought about for family members to contribute to?
Well, we did not define exactly how that would be, but it's just an area for consideration that we'll delve further into.
All right.
And that was based on what was in Nepal's Senior Citizens Act, which we will peruse further. The whole matter of elderly protection orders, if that is a measure to be considered against elder abuse, and whether there should be the inclusion for mandatory reporting and how we treat with investigations and protection orders. And that is based on the legislation for South Africa. Then there is a whole matter of, senior citizens' identity cards and whether that would be now considered as part of national identification system that exists. Whole matter of accessibility and facilities.
What would be the rationale behind senior citizens' identity cards?
Currently, they have an identification card that allow them to access services. Currently.
Yeah, but if we're moving to a national ID
That's
system,
what I'm saying. If we are moving to a national identification system, we'll see if that is what it would be.
Okay.
And then the
I was just adding to what the PS said, that in having our card, we do get information on the senior. Basic information, perhaps, not to the extent that was discussed earlier, but it does, form some minimum information that we have on the senior citizen.
In relation to what, CTD?
To the card that Mrs. Jennings referred to the PS referred
That
to.
provides you with information?
Yes, because they have to register with us, so they provide us some information.
I see.
In order to get the card.
I see.
Right.
I see.
So we know where they live, basic information on them.
And to your knowledge, the proposed NIDS card, wouldn't it contain information similar?
We'll do more.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying. If it's the NIDS, then that would be their identity card.
I think isn't that the policy position of the government? Isn't
Yes,
that where
the
we have
NIDS.
gone?
Right.
The NIDS is it?
It
We're-
is.
It's just in temporal rollout now?
It is.
Okay. Continue. A moment, please. Senator Dr. Morris had his hand up. No?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Senator
two
Dr.
quick
Morris.
points.
Dr. Morris, can I just ask you to hold 1 second, please? Let me just get a response from our legal reform head, Ms. Wilkins, before you make that comment.
Okay.
Ms. Wilkins?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to point out that the NIDS may not necessarily serve the same purpose, because when that person registers with that authority, they're giving the information to that authority, and the authority cannot share the information. So when the ministry receives it, they will have it on file. They will know that this is a senior citizen. They will know where they live, and they will have a better sense of the services that that person would need. So I don't think it replaces it, is what I'm saying. Even if they don't give them a card, but the opportunity to identify them would still be required to be made by the ministry.
But then again, that sounds like something that the council or the ministry needs to be having a conversation with those in the development stages
National
of the NIDS
Registration
program.
Authority.
Because what I do not want us to do is to ask our senior citizens to have 10 IDs to be able to be recognized by the society. That the entire point it must be that we are seeking to promulgate legislation that makes life easier for them. So I'm sorry, you know, I want to be careful about how I say this, but I think a lot more initiative, aggressiveness, what is the word I'm trying to find, Senator Gill? Proactive. I think the council has to make itself, put itself in the business of these discussions, be involved in the conversation, and whether that must happen through your minister, that urging has to come from you as you recognize that there are these gaps. So the senior citizen card, as simple as it is, CTD, and as simple a comment as you were making, not hoping to uncover all of this from me, is an issue, because you're asking the senior citizen, eventually we all will have a NIDS card. But no, that's not enough for you to recognize me as a senior citizen. I now must go and register with you. No, we can't do that. We have to have the conversations now with the NIDS program and those developing the NIDS program to ensure that the senior citizen and the context of the senior citizen is captured. And then there may be need, Council Ms. Wilkins, for us to have a conversation about what's going on with data protection, because if we're collecting all of this information for the purpose of making the citizens' lives better, but the agencies that are implementing can't share the information, then we need to have a conversation about how we overcome that, even while we consider the international treaties, etc., that would have generated this process of data protection across the globe, and for which I know we also have signed on too. So there's a lot of that coming out of this, but ultimately, I think my colleagues would join me in saying this committee must propose actionable recommendations to the cabinet that are not going to make the senior citizens' lives more difficult, that along with the protectionist part of such a legislation, their lives are made easier. That is the committee work that I wish to preside over, no other. Senator Dr. Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify two things. One, the senior citizens, Council for Senior Citizens now functions as a department in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. And so it does not have, based on my knowledge of the laws that are there relating, that touches on senior citizens, it doesn't have any immediate responsibility for those legislations, because it's a department, and so the legal department in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security would be driving those operations. When and if we recommend that the Council for Senior Citizens become a statutory body, then the status of the organization will change, and it will have departments, for example, a legal department that will guide it in terms of any matter that is legal, and it would have a board and all of that under its own jurisdiction. So I wanted to just lend some clarity to that. And the other thing that I wanted to find out, because you referenced a document earlier, Madam Chair, that seems to have come in a bundle just today as it relates to the establishment of an Older Care Act. And I wanted to find out where that came from today, and if that was Mrs. Jennings, yes, is referencing.
Senator Dr. Morris, I'm going to ask. Committee, because the document I was referencing, which I assume you have as well, yes, it is a submission of the advisory board. The advisory board is, who is the chairman of the advisory board?
Dr. Julian McCoy Davis.
So are you aware of this document? Are you aware that this was sent?
No, Madam Chair, I'm just hearing of that document, unless it was sent electronically in a bundle, but I am just being made aware of that document here now, because it's being referenced in the committee.
I think.
Committee clerk, Dr. Morris is telling me that it was sent electronically. We have hard copies in the chamber, but it was sent on the same email meeting was.
Today.
No, prior.
Well,
28th February is the first time you should have gotten a needed document. After that.
Because I believe.
Repeated there.
And Emergency Management (ODPEM) will be giving information on an emergency situation affecting the island. Please be on the alert and listen to your radio and television for further information. This was a test of the emergency alert system brought to you.
So I leave that to arrange for us to be able to interrogate this document if you're not prepared to do so today. Very well?
But I think that some of the recommendations may have overlap. So
there's side overlap. There are some very different and interesting things in this document that I'm pretty sure the committee members would like to
that's fine, Chair.
Yes. Senator Gill.
For that discussion, you could send us in advance the policy. The policy.
We did send the policy.
Oh, you did send the policy?
The senior citizens policy you're talking about? Yes, you should have it in your email bundle.
In the email, okay.
Yes, yes. Okay. Very well. Pierce, are there any further remarks you wish to share with us?
All right, Chair. Just going through some.
Chairman.
Senator Longmore. A moment, please. Yes, Senator Longmore.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Just remind
I am
Senator Longmore.
en route, and sorry, I'm in this state, but just wanted to chime in here. I did not get to listen to the entire conversation, but I have two key points that I would like to see if we could get some information on also. With respect to what Senator Fraser Mr. Binns raised, I had a concern regarding abuse, if there's any record regarding elder abuse, but specifically if the information can be disaggregated towards neglect, which is the most common form of abuse, and also financial abuse. I'm sure we can recognize why this is important, and I'm wondering if we can have that bit of information specifically teased out. The other matter that I wanted to get some direction on, and perhaps whether it is to be included in the proposals for suggested legislative changes, or if the council presently pursues it, is around and Senator Morris, Professor Morris kind of mentioned it, but more specifically when he mentioned about legal matters, but especially around the preparation of wills and the transition of familial equity, so to speak. If there is any service that is being offered to the elder population, or generally any member of the public who may so desire to create that financial planning, but especially for that group that tends to have cultural taboos around of generating a will, or maybe having some inertia around it, but could significantly impact on not just the familial structure, but the legal system, as a lot of these issues are tied up in our legal system. If there's an avenue or a way that the council sees to that, or if we can see that as one of the proposals too. Thank you. I don't know if she has any feedback now, if there's any of that can be had, or I can wait until she returns.
Yes. Oh, I think we had mentioned, member, that there needs to be the inclusion for matters related to elder abuse, which would include financial abuse as well. In terms of the data.
And neglect, please.
Neglect.
Yes. Yes.
In terms of the data, we don't have that with us today, but I think it would be good to get that information from the courts in terms of what those cases look like. That would be helpful for us.
P.S., who are you suggesting is to get that information?
No, we will.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I think that's what the senator is asking you for. For my colleagues online, I just want to remind you, for the purposes I indicated earlier, when you wish to speak, just to use the raise hand feature. And I do apologize to Senator Dr. Morris. I seem to have skipped over him. But I'm glad Senator Longmore has gotten a chance to make a contribution today. Senator Dr. Morris, you have the floor.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, before Dr. Morris comes in, Professor Morris comes in, am I to assume the other part of my question around the will be addressed?
Yes, and we will try and get some information from the Ministry of Health as well as it relates to neglect. We know of cases that are in the hospitals as well.
Madam Chair, I've spoken already, I've made my intervention.
I'm not sure I heard Senator Dr. Morris clearly. Oh, okay, very well. Thank you. Senator Gale?
I know, look, this anchoring this piece of legislation is going to be dependent on the recommendations coming out of the Ministry of Labor. And certainly, I think this was a very helpful exercise today, but I consider it to be some sort of a teaser. Why do I say that? There would have been some recommendations made in relation to proposals for this kind of legislation that I think, for the benefit of this committee, those recommendations ought to be put in a more expansive nature. Yeah? That we could readily interrogate and even understand in a better way. Certainly for me, I'm interested in how that tribunal will work, looking at tribunals being an appellate body. However, in this case, what would be the authority mechanism to treat with these matters before it goes to a tribunal, if that's the conceptual approach? Yeah? Bearing in mind that the Maintenance Act on its own has not worked, because who would be bringing these matters to a tribunal and how would they be coming to the tribunal? So I think we need, Chair, to get a greater appreciation of these recommendations and certainly what these rights of elderly would entail in a part of any proposal into the legislation. So I'm encouraging that the ministry ought to come back to us in the very near future.
And I thank you for that. I thank you for that, Senator Gale. I think your sentiments are shared by other colleagues of us. Certainly, it is shared by me sitting in the chair. I just want to follow up on a question from one of the questions Senator Longmore asked about the disaggregation of numbers in relation to the issue of elder abuse. How does the council engage in those issues? How do you confront elder abuse issues? Is it that you have a formal system for those kinds of matters? Please go ahead. Thank you, Ms. Norris.
Yes, Chair. Reports of elder abuse are made to, well, suspected elder abuse are made to the council from different avenues. We operate within the Social Security Division of the ministry that has social workers in other departments. And so some of those reports may come from social workers either within our own ministry or in the wider government service, from members of the public, concerned neighbors, persons from the clergy. I would say just the general public, senior citizens themselves call in to report abuse. And then family members, sometimes family members residing overseas who believe that family members who are local might not be keeping up with their obligations, particularly to parents or so, that for which they might be providing support or care, or they have responsibility for.
And what are the kind of numbers of reports you're receiving? I don't know, pick a period, monthly, annually.
Right. So for the financial year 2023-24, we got 18 reports.
18.
18. And for this financial year that is ending, we have 13 reports so far.
And what is the response that you have when you get a report? What then happens?
Right, but before I get there, Madam Chair, just to inform the members that it is a global issue that elder abuse is underreported for various reasons. So it is not a situation that is unique to Jamaica, that you have low reports of cases of elder abuse. When the council receives a report, the social workers, I'm sorry. Yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So Upon receiving a report of elder abuse, the social workers attempt to interrogate the matter, usually to make a home visit to ascertain the safety or the security of the senior citizen. There are times when the assistance of police officers are required, and there are other times when the reporter may indicate, oftentimes it's a senior, that they do not want anybody to know, right? So the social workers conduct a home visit, and we do an assessment to see to the general status or condition of the senior citizen. Of course, it is often informed by the type of report that the type of abuse that is reported. So, for example, in a case of sexual abuse, of course, the most immediate response would be to attempt to get some kind of assistance towards health care, and that would necessitate us encouraging the senior to report the case, and for it to be turned over to CISOCA or the necessary legislative framework that exists for that. In the case of physical abuse,
a moment for me, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, in the case of physical abuse, again, the safety of the senior is priority, and so the social worker would need to establish, and with the senior citizen, we are possible, if this is somebody who is coherent as to their needs, what they would like to do, we have to, for example, engage with the police to determine what the next steps should be. This would probably be a case of assault, but of course, this requires the senior citizen to make a report or to press charges against the person who would have offended them.
I thank you for that. I'm going to ask my members to allow us to halt the proceedings at this point. There's activity in the Parliament now to prepare for the sitting of the House of Representatives. But I'm also going to ask Mrs. Morrison if on the occasion when you return, for us to follow up right on this point in relation to the matters with elder abuse and the structure that the council has to deal with it, because instinctively, while we may fall within the harm of underreporting, as many other countries might, I want to hazard a guess that it is a little bit more than underreporting when we have 18 and 14 cases being reported in a single year, given the size of the elderly population. And I would wish to interrogate a little bit more how we engage both the elderly and stakeholders on elder abuse issues, whether they're of a sexual nature, a physical assault nature, or financial. So if you can let us pick up right here, and then we will also take the position paper in relation to, particularly I'm interested in having a discussion about the rights issues that are proposed in this document. That being said, my colleagues have no final comments. Senator Dr. Morris, Fraser Binns, Longmore, and I believe Senator Gabriela Morris is also on the platform. And I take that as a no. Senator Gale? Yes, we do have some housekeeping matters, which, with no objection from my colleagues, I'm going to ask to allow us to defer to the next meeting. And yes, we don't like to defer minutes in that way, but given the timing and the need for the parliamentary team to prepare the chamber for the next sitting of the House. So, Madam Committee Clerk, we will defer our confirmation of the minutes. And I also, as Senator Gale had referenced, acknowledged the information which we had requested from Statin and which they have provided, which we will attend to. Please place that on the agenda for us to take a look at that, Mrs. Beckford, on the next occasion. Very well. I thank the team from the Ministry of Labor, Social Security for their contribution today. I thank them for coming. I look forward to having an even deeper interrogation on the issues that would attend for the work that this committee is looking to do, and for your support in really diving a lot deeper into what we can come up with from your perspective as a labor and social security arm of the state. So I thank you very much. I thank the Legal Reform Department and our own Senior Parliamentary Counsel, as usual, for your very supportive attention to this committee. I thank my colleagues and Senator Gale, my partner senator today in the chamber. Thank you very much. Let me not forget our committee clerk, Mrs. Beckford, who goes above and absolutely beyond the call of duty in the support of this committee. I ask the members for a motion for adjournment. Thank you, Senator Gale. Moved by Senator Gale and seconded by Senator Dr. Morris.
Seconded, Chair.
Seconded. Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator Fraser-Vance. With that, the committee is adjourned.
You can. We can. Let's all take the pledge to end gang violence now. Report what you know. Call 811-311-119 or visit the nearest police station.
A message from the Ministry of National Security.
We want a peace for Jamaica. Yeah, yeah. We have to be our brother's keeper. Yeah, yeah. Jamaica live good, yeah. I make we enjoy life. What we feel safe at night. Jamaica live good. I better you and I. No say we future bright. Jamaica live good. Come together as one. I make the violence the world.
Young Jamaicans up to 35. Your government will reserve up to 10% of NHT housing solutions over the next 5 years, just for you, with 100% financing up to 15 million Jamaican dollars. This is how we are empowering and breaking the cycle of poverty meaningfully. Your government is caring for you.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to another math session where learning math is fun. I am Faithlyn Williams, your teacher for today. In today's session, we will be looking at adding multiples of 10 to numbers less than 10. To begin our session, I want us to look at what multiples are. But you must listen to these scenarios coming up. They will help us to understand what multiples are.